Hello, welcome to The Point World Affairs. I'm your host, Daniel Chang. On our show, we bring you stories grabbing headlines and turning heads across the globe. Once again, we're joined in the studio by Song Se-reum Professor of Law at Kyung-hee University and a regular contributor to Arirang TV. Thank you so much for making time for us today, Professor.
Happy to be back, Daniel.
We have a different format today. I understand you came prepared with some interesting hot words.
Yes, there are a lot of things happening in the world, so I had some tough time choosing the keywords. So, we got winner or loser, mysterious murder, 996 in ICU. I bet you can't guess what it is in the third one.
Well, Professor, thank you for those amazing selections you made for us today. As for 996 ICU, I'd surprise you with some of the facts I already know about it.
Okay.
But first, let's start things off by going with winner or loser.
Okay.
Wikileaks co-founder Julian Assange's 7-year asylum at the Ecuadorian embassy ended after getting arrested by British police. His biggest leaks range from top-secret U.S. files to political scandals. Assange came under the spotlight in 2010 after releasing hundreds of thousands of United States classified files on Iraq War and Afghanistan War. One of the unveiled clips showed U.S. aircrew shooting down civilians and press staffers. The U.S. classified Assange as one of the most wanted fugitives, but some praised him as a great whistleblower.
Na, unser erstes Hauptanliegen ist es, zu protestieren gegen die Verhaftung von Julian Assange, weil wir der Auffassung sind, nicht diejenigen, die Kriegsverbrechen veröffentlicht haben, gehören hinter Gitter, sondern jene, die sie begangen haben oder sie verantworten.
However, Assange is facing sexual assault allegations in Sweden and has reportedly exhibited abnormal and incontinent behaviors during his stay at the embassy after losing the public's attention.
Por ejemplo, que durante su estadía en la embajada en Londres, durante el gobierno del expresidente Correa y mientras era canciller el señor Ricardo Patiño, toleraron cosas como que el señor Assange ponga heces fecales en las paredes de la embajada.
The U.S. is working on extraditing Assange, while Swedish prosecutors said they are mulling reactivations of the rape allegation against the WikiLeaks founder.
So for decades, government tried to shut down WikiLeaks and hunt down the head of the organization. And now it looks like Julian Assange, he is being looked at a different light. The people from the Ecuadorian embassy side are saying that he displayed a lot of concerning aggressive behavior during his 7 years within the premise.
Right. Anybody who's locked in amount to a house arrest for 7 years, I think that they'll go a little bit mental. I mean, we heard about his cat incidents, Wi-Fi stealing, and his ties. I think it's understandable, but he faces pretty serious charges, especially from the U.S. Charges include trying to steal or hack into the Pentagon's computer. So this is a very interesting charges and very serious charges. So that's why the U.S. is trying to extradite him to the U.S. court. However, I think this causes a very serious and interesting issue because a lot of journalists around the world might be saying that, well, get an informant, get some secret sources, investigation, and divulge, do a expose. Isn't that what we do? So I think there's a dangerous closeness to what journalists do or the whistleblowers do. So I think this could become an issue of the press privileges or First Amendment rights in the U.S. But of course, there is a tempering force of national security, and you shouldn't break the law doing that. But national security issues tend to be kind of subjective, depending on what kind of stance the government has. So I think this would be a very long, hotly debated issue and having a lot of supporters on both sides.
Right. Assange's supporters are saying that he's not concerned about facing British or Swedish justice, but rather American injustice. Let's move on to our next keyword of the day. I believe it is a mysterious murder. That's what we're going with. Let's take a look at the clip.
Okay.
Duan Thi Hung, a Vietnamese woman who was accused of killing Kim Jong-nam, the half-brother of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, in February 2 years ago, will soon be released from a Malaysian prison. Hung's co-accused Indonesian woman named Siti Aisyah has been freed already. Hung and Aisyah said they were unwittingly manipulated by North Korean agents and added they thought they were part of a reality prank show. 4 North Korean men who reportedly told the woman to apply poisonous nerve agent VX on Kim's face have fled to North Korea right after the murder. Chances of Kim's case remaining unsolved has risen as no one is convicted of murder.
Siti Aisyah and Duan Thi Hung are the unassuming participants and victims, or did it require someone more than a regular Joe to handle VX nerve agents?
Right. I don't think there's anything mysterious about this. The only question is whether they were a willing participant or unsuspecting kind of a pawn in this scheme by North Korea. I think the courts have believed what they said because the charges against them in terms of intentional murder has been all dropped. And real perpetrator has fled to North Korea. So it's not going to be solved in a legal sense, but we are perfectly clear, I think, this is another chapter in the North Korean brutality and their antics.
Right. Let's hope proper authorities take a closer look into investigating those who are involved, aside from these 2 supposedly unassuming victims.
Right. Their violation of human rights continues.
Right. Let's move on to the other keyword, hot word that you've prepared for us, the intriguing 996 ICU.
I thought you would never guess.
996.ICU is a playful jab and a rare pushback to an overtime working culture, meaning a worker could end up in the intense care unit after working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. for 6 days a week. 996 quickly became viral after the word popped up for the first time in GitHub, a popular code-sharing platform used by Chinese developers. Alibaba founder Jack Ma has been criticized for his recent remarks on the idea. Ma called 996 a huge blessing and said Alibaba does not need those who wish to work 8 hours a day. His post earned 300 million views on Weibo and prompted criticism from Chinese app users. Chinese state-run newspaper People's Daily also slammed the overtime working culture by saying it's wrong to label those who oppose 996 as slackers. In response to the backlash, Ma explained his post was to emphasize how passionate he is about working.
That was very highly insensitive of an iconic figure to say that it's a bliss to work yourself half to death, because indeed, for startups in the tech industry in China, people are dying of stress or committing suicide.
I'm not taking on his side, but I think what he meant to say is not to slave drive his employees, but he's trying to say something about the passion. And maybe he's drawing upon his own experience of being very passionate and very dedicated to his work. But on the other hand, it's horrifying to hear that your employer wants to work until you drop. I think that the value has changed these days, that neglecting your families, neglecting everything else, including your health, to the work for a company, I don't think it's something that young people want. And probably Jack Ma now realizes that. And I think it's also a reflection of the kind of a working culture, or brutal working culture that a lot of Asians had, including Korea. So this is a good news item that people should think twice about these.
What we have today on the agenda for The Point segment is Japan's Abe Administration. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and his cabinet are faced with a series of issues which could possibly lead them to a political roadblock. Abe stepped up in approval ratings following the announcement of Japan's new historical era of Reiwa, but recent revelations in alleged scandals and controversies involving the Prime Minister and his cabinet members have brought the ratings down.
内閣総理大臣としてこの発言について深くお詫び申し上げたいと思います。 任命責任はもとより内閣総理大臣たる私にあります。
From the past, we know that Abe's usual game plan to bail himself out of the internal political scandals was to utilize conflicts with South Korea. But this time, it completely backfired. That's because the World Trade Organization has ruled in favor of South Korea in regards to the ban on Fukushima seafood imports. Tokyo is puzzled that its plan to request the WTO to lift other nations' import bans on its seafood has taken a big hit.
福島第一原発事故に伴う諸外国の輸入、この規制措置緩和撤廃は極めて重要な課題であるというふうに思っております。引き続き韓国を含む関係国に対して科学的根拠、これに基づいて輸入規制の撤廃、緩和が進むよう粘り強く進めていきたいというふうに思います。
Due to lingering domestic issues and the rise in the number of people opposed to see him retain power, Abe's chance for a fourth term looks as uncertain as ever.
Right, Professor, let's move on to our main segment of the week. Well, this is our key story of the day. Shinzo Abe has been on top for a very long time, and that spot, the prime ministerial position in Japan, we've seen many revolving doors before he came into office. It looks like maybe it's time for him to move on.
That's exactly what he said. He's not going to look for fourth term. And in fact, in saying so, probably it's is not really a surprise because the party rule in the LDP, there's a term limit. Essentially, originally it was 2 term limits, and they had to change the rule to allow him to serve for the 3rd term. So in order to look for or seek the 4th term, they have to change it again.
We'll keep the interesting juice inside for a while. We'll be picking your brain again in a short while. For now, let us connect via Skype with Jonathan Miller, Senior Fellow at Japan Institute of International Affairs, to see how locals feel about Abe's administration. Jonathan, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me on the show. It's a real pleasure to be on.
Likewise. Now, reports say it is uncertain that Shinzo Abe can hold on to the reign and win for the 4th term. Is it true that his ratings are falling and more people are not siding with him in Japan?
Well, thanks again for that question. Interestingly enough, it seems that the Abe administration's popularity and approval ratings are actually in a recovery phase right now. You can see from most recent polling, especially after the announcement of the new imperial era termed as Reiwa, the Abe cabinet the approval rating has actually risen and now is above 50%. So right now the Abe government is actually in a fairly comfortable position. There are a lot of things on his plate. He has a consumption tax rise in the fall, which he has to worry about. He has the G20 coming up in June. And the last kind of point I'd like to make, and one of the wild cards that I think some mention in the thoughts of Abe extending his term beyond 3, would be what happens with the U.S. Right now, Japan is under critical trade talks with the United States. This is a trade talks that Japan didn't really want to get into, but basically felt that it was kind of forced into this, and they very much wanted the U.S. to be within the framework of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which they originally agreed to. So how those talks go, and more broadly, what happens in the next U.S. general election, if the Trump administration is elected again, I think there's a lot of sentiments in Japan that Abe has been definitely able at managing the Trump administration. So perhaps a change at that point might be seen as too risky. And the final point will be the regional security environment. So one of Abe's strong points, and one of the things that those in his party point to a lot when they point to his stability, is his management of the diplomatic situation, some of the tensions in the Korean Peninsula. And while tensions with China have stabilized somewhat, that continues to be a deep concern with near daily incursions in maritime waters around the Senkaku Islands and a host of other issues with China. So I think all of those things will factor into the decision on Abe's future.
All right, Jonathan, thank you so much for your insights and your time. We appreciate it. Now, Professor Song, why is it that Abe is able to stay in power, and why is it that there have been so many frequent replacements before he came into power?
First of all, I wouldn't say Japan is in any ways undemocratic in any sense, but it is true that Japan had the one-party rule for a very long time. LDP has been in power almost continuously since 1955. There were like 4 years and 2 months period that they were not in the power, but when that happened, they had their not 9/11, but 3/11, which is
right, the Fukushima incident, which
right.
one of Abe's top men fell into deep trouble for saying certain controversial remarks regarding the victims.
Right. So that insensitivity comes pretty in the recent news. But the fact is that the Japanese people had this conservative streak where LDP was able to serve that long a time. So I don't think it's a matter of making a swift change in Japan. Probably what's difficult is to find somebody who would head LDP so that the torch would continue. Shinzo Abe has been viewed as a very deft foreign policy negotiator, especially his handling. Well, I don't know if he handled, but his dealing with Donald Trump has been lauded.
He tries very hard.
He does, and I think Japanese people value that kind of
the valiant efforts, regardless of the
efforts.
outcome.
But that efforts is visible in the international stage, and they think that Japan has to be playing more role, and they are seeing that that effort is making some fruits. So I think that the prospect of Shinzo Abe serving a 4th term cannot be ruled out at this point because of the lack of replacement at the position. And also, if you look at the opinion polls, the criticism about Shinzo Abe and the LDP is not about their incompetence or anything else. It's about arrogance or complacency, which just means that they approve of what the party and the Shinzo Abe does in general, but they think that they're being complacent because of the long reign and the kind of popularity he enjoyed. If you look back to 2013 and 17, his popularity rating was just through the roof. It's just that it was tempered, they're going through some hardships, but it's not to a severity where they are contemplating, or Japanese people are contemplating wholesale change in the leadership or party or the government.
How much of his support factor comes from putting South Korea in a rather negative light or vilifying us by sensationalizing certain issues or topics?
Well, I think it's tied to the popularity of the LDP, conservative faction, but in other words, it's a little bit nationalistic, and that stint always has been there. And the nationalistic factor always ties with the relationship with the neighboring countries. So China or Korea is always their popular target or villain, if they want to make us a villain. That works in Japan, to our chagrin. But I don't think at this point is working very well because of a little bit of diplomatic defeat.
Well, let's hope they tear up that playbook and move on to something more constructive in the near future.
We hope so.
All right, Professor, now it's time for us to sit back and watch some of the intriguing or interesting stories from around the globe. We will take a quick trip around the world for the snippets that grabbed attention in various corners of our world. Our first stop is France.
Notre-Dame Cathedral in Paris was engulfed in a huge fire on April 15th local time. Firefighters tackled the blaze to their fullest to contain it, but the spire and roof of the 860-year-old monument have collapsed in the end. Paris police said the fire might have occurred by accident and added it could have started near the spire where renovation work was being carried out. French President Emmanuel Macron canceled his planned address to the nation set for the evening and headed straight to the scene. Leaders around the world and Vatican have addressed their condolences to the horrific damage.
I've been walking past the cathedral every day lately this week, and so familiar. And now it's burnt, and it's upsetting, very upsetting.
The church gets an average of 30,000 visitors every day. It was a tragic moment not just for the people of France, but also for the people of the Christian faith around the world.
Next up, let's go over to Hong Kong.
Donald Trump shows off his vocal prowess in a fluent Cantonese. He runs into some of the biggest politicians in China's history, like Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai. These are some scenes from Trump on Show, an opera directed by Hong Kong playwright Lee Kui-ming. Lee wishes to perform the opera in front of the real figures the show portrays and hopes it could improve U.S.-China ties. Would there be a day we'd see Trump and Kim hold hands just like them?
Next, let's head to Italy.
Welcome to Domus Aurea, aka the Golden Palace of Roman Emperor Nero. After strolling through floors with exotic patterns and walk past the marble pillars, you can finally come across the frescoes on the walls. You might need a shade to protect your eyes from all the glittery golden lights. The Golden Palace was restored and opened for the first time in 10 years as a virtual reality tour program. Now anyone can rewind the clock and live their own Roman experience.
Our next up is the U.S.
It's not a secret that Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg makes less than most of us, surviving on a $1 check every year. But in 2018, he was provided security that is worth $22.6 million. That's more than double the security cost his company paid for him 2 years ago. Facebook put in $9 million to keep Zuckerberg safe. Facebook scaled up costs to protect its CEO since the social media company was reportedly involved with Russia's alleged influence on the 2016 U.S. presidential election. The security costs included $2.6 million for Zuckerberg's personal use of private jets, and that has spurred controversy.
Our last stop is Thailand.
People flew in from around the world to make a big splash on Songkran, Thailand's biggest holiday. Songkran is a nationwide festival held in April to celebrate Thailand's Buddhist New Year and to wish for loved ones' well-being. Traditionally, families get together and sprinkle water on Buddha statue or tower in homes, symbolically representing washing away bad luck from the previous year. What used to be a placid event gained a raucous edge in recent years as the crime rate during the period tends to go up than usual. Keep in mind that respecting the rules can make the festivity more delightful.
Well, though we ended things up on a high note with the stories from around the world, unfortunately, we will have to focus on the fire in Paris, Notre-Dame Cathedral. I understand that you were there while it was intact in one piece.
Right. I visited, in the happen chance, I visited there last year and a couple of years ago as well. It seemed like it was, I was wondering why I was going back there, but truth of the matter is it's one of my favorite places. A lot of tourists, but strangely very serene if you go inside. So when I saw that it was ablaze, it seemed like I felt a little bit of what French people were feeling, a sense of loss.
Well, let's wrap things up on a high note. Songkran, everyone getting wet. It is a joyous occasion, and it's good to see everyone in the country taking part in such a wild occasion.
A water fight is always fun, but you see the grown-ups and children alike getting involved in these nationwide festivals. I think it's a brilliant idea.
But unfortunately, there is a dark side to Songkran. Apparently, there are a number of accidents happening during the festivities, bringing into question the authorities' measures to ensure safety of the public.
I hear that most of the accidents are by the motorcycles. They're number 2 in the world in motor vehicle accidents. So if you combine the wet surface, a lot of people flocking in, a lot of times no helmets, and a lot of booze on the street, probably it does make sense, or it's not surprising that the accident rate goes up twice or more during that period.
Well, Professor, we've reached the end of our program for this segment. Thank you so much for being here with us. We appreciate your presence and your insights.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, that's all we have for you on this episode of Point World Affairs. Do tune in again next week for a brand new segment of intriguing stories from across the globe as well. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye for now.